thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. This is Up for a Chat with Cindy O'Mara, Karen Smith, and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Karen Smith.
I'm Kim Morrison.
And our beautiful Cindy is on a plane right now, so she's not with us. But, Kimmy and I felt that today's guest, it's fine for us to go ahead because it's a very beautiful story. It's a very positive and a very inspiring and uplifting story that hasn't come from the greatest of beginnings, but I think being able to have this conversation is going to bring an enormous amount of awareness, not only to the issue at hand, but I think also too, it's going to bring enormous awareness to the internal dialogue that a lot of us have as women and as men, and how early this internal dialogue can start. So I want to welcome to the show the beautiful Millie Thomas. Welcome to the show, Millie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's going to be such a beautiful show. Millie, tell us a little bit about your background and tell us, we know why you're on the show, but why don't you tell us why you're on the show?
Okay, so I suffered with anorexia nervosa from the age of 12 to 27. So 15 very, very long years, which I would sort of describe as being in a living hell of sorts. And when I recovered from anorexia, I decided that I wanted to help others who were suffering because through my own journey, I really, really felt that we were dealing with a very, very broken mental health system that really wasn't equipped for dealing with people suffering from eating disorders. And so that's when I decided that I was also going to move to my happy place, the Sunshine Coast, and things have really, really grown from there.
I would love to ask you, from being a young person, as young as 12, to then fall into or somehow explain to us how you arrived at the position you got yourself into from an eating disorders perspective. And can you give it to us from your point of view in the moment of being that person, and then maybe it was even also as a reflective of looking back at that person? Could you give us the two viewpoints in any chance, Millie?
Sure. So in terms of in that moment, look, I'd started at an all-girls private school. I was feeling very sort of a little bit out of my depth and felt that I needed to fit in. And upon reflection, there was no need for me to try and fit in. I fit in perfectly. But in my head, it felt that I needed to, possibly change something to be as good as everybody else was. And my immediate thought was, well, if I lost some weight, then maybe I'd fit in more. And because with eating disorders, we talk about it like the genes load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. So I was genetically predisposed to having an eating disorder, and also my personality characteristics in terms of being a high achiever, type A, tendencies towards OCD, it really set the scene for me in terms of then being thrown into an environment that was a trigger for the eating disorder. And so before I sort of knew it, it wasn't a conscious thing. I decided to make a few small changes, like decided that I was going to make my own lunch and take that to school. Decided that I was going to do some more exercise, just what would be, I guess, seen as being healthy, positive decisions to make, and they really just spiraled out of control before me or my family really had a chance to recognize that it was an issue. And back then, the I guess sort of accepted form of treatment was that, that I was to be pulled out of school and that I was to be refed, and then once my weight was at an acceptable level, I'd be put back into school. And so that's what was done. As recommended by the professionals at that time. And what that doesn't address is the psychological issues that were underpinning my eating disorder. So I, went back to school, and everyone was like, oh, Millie's well again. But I wasn't well. You know, my head games were still very, very, very prevalent. And, you know, I wouldn't socially be able to interact in ways that, you know, other teenagers could. So I wouldn't be able to go to birthday parties and eat anything or drink anything for fear of, you know, what the food might contain. And so it was sort of like my high school years were, you know, sure, I was existing. I call it existing. I wasn't truly living. You know, I was existing, but I wasn't living a full life, and I certainly wasn't myself, so to speak, because I was very, you know, overtaken by an eating disorder. We talk about the fact that you have an eating disorder self and a healthy self, and my eating disorder self was very, very much in the driver's seat. So back in those young years, it just took over, and it was very, very hard for me to differentiate between what was my healthy self and what was my eating disorder self. And, you know, so when making simple decisions around, you know, what I was going to eat, it was really hard for me to decipher, well, is that being driven by my eating disorder or is that being driven by me? You know, and in terms of reflecting back on it, I look back on it and I just feel really sad. I feel really sad that, you know, I had that thought that I needed to fit in, and that then, you know, manifested in the way that it did, because I do feel, I mean, I always talk about it, that I never regret what I've gone through, because I feel that it's made me the person that I am today, and it allows me to do the wonderful work that I do. But I do, you know, I guess yearn for the teenage years that I didn't have, in terms of being carefree and going out and, you know, getting drunk and all the rites of passage that people go through. You know, I never experienced that because I was always, you know, playing by my eating disorder's rules. So I really didn't get to have that carefree, laissez-faire attitude that a lot of teenagers have. Yeah, does that sort of answer that?
Yeah, I'm just really curious, because obviously this doesn't happen to everybody.
Yes.
And obviously not everybody would think like you. Like, I would say I was quite obsessed with my health and wellness.
Yes.
But I never had that association to not wanting to eat or to wanting to control myself in that way. Can you somehow articulate to us what that looks like from your point of view? How does that evolve? How do you flick? Does a switch flick that you no longer understand that healthy range that you could be in? Or I'm just curious around the mindset, and Carren might be able to help me here too.
Yes, look, I think for me, it was in the beginning a gradual progression of, you know, simple behaviours, like I said, you know, deciding that I was going to take my lunch, pack my own lunches, and then it became not having my lunches at school and that sort of thing. And I do think that in terms of when you start to lose a certain amount of weight, the switch definitely does flick. And it's very, very hard to pull yourself out of that and see things in reality, because your reality is very, very, in the reality that other people would see, because your perception is very, very distorted. So not only your distorted perception of your body, but also, you know, you're placing emphasis on things that really don't matter that much to other people, and you're very, I mean, you're obsessed to a level that other people aren't, you know, about calories, about exercise, about the way you look, about what you're wearing, comparing yourself to other people. And I think you're right. Look, some people are conscious of their health and wellness and conscious of their weight, and they don't go down that eating disorder path. I think there are a lot of factors at play. It's got a lot to do with genetics. It's got a lot to do with, you know, your personality traits, and then the environment that you're in and the people that you're surrounded by. You know, it sets the scene for that next trajectory, so to speak.
Millie, you said that the environment that you're in,
mm-hmm.
understanding your personality traits, you said that you were like a high achiever and a typical A type, and That, I really get that. Tell me a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about the environment that you were in that lit the flame. What was that about?
I do believe, look, I had an amazing education at the school that I went to, and I will be forever grateful for that. Socially, the environment for me was incredibly, incredibly toxic. It was all girls. So there was a lot of talk around weight, people's body shapes, what people were wearing. And I think that was probably that up until that point, I hadn't really considered my body other than, what it enabled me to be able to do. And food to me was fuel and something to also be enjoyed. And once I got into that sort of all-girls environment where everybody was quite concerned about how they looked, what they were eating, that started to change. And I started to, realize that, people looked at food as being, this whole good and bad, which is not at all, and food should never be labelled as good and bad. But there were these little things that I started to pick up and go, oh, okay, so I shouldn't be eating that, and I should be doing this, and my legs should look like that. And I really had been very, very sheltered from that up until that point. I'd grown up with a family who were healthy, active, and there was never any judgment about body shape. It was a very, very balanced approach to that. And I'm very grateful for my parents for that, because a lot of children don't grow up in households like that, and there is a lot of labeling of body shapes and sizes. I do also feel, and look, eating disorders don't discriminate. It doesn't matter, what socioeconomic, group you're in, or, what background you've had. They really don't discriminate. But for me, that environment of being very much amongst people who, of sort of socioeconomic status, high socioeconomic status, was also another reason, because that was, not only were the girls that I was surrounded by obsessed by it, but also the mothers were too. And it's really interesting, because I have had discussions with girls that I've been to school with, just in very recent years. And they've admitted to me that, oh yes, well, mum suffered from bulimia the whole time we were at school. Or, yeah, look, mum, had anorexia, or, whatever it is. And it was almost like this generational thing that was happening. And so I guess in terms of environment, that's what I was talking about.
I think that's a really big distinction. And I think a lot of girls, particularly, statistically, tend to go through those phases where, they're going through puberty, they're growing up, things are changing in their bodies, and they start to compare themselves with other girls. And
the change thing is huge, because you're dealing with your hormones, you're dealing with your body changing. And now, especially with social media, there's a societal pressure. And we're also in this obesogenic culture where there's such a focus on tackling the obesity epidemic. I think what I often say is that if I had been, if I was 12 now, and, I don't think I would have had a chance of not having an eating disorder, and also not probably, I don't know that I would have survived, just because, back then we didn't even have social media, so there wasn't that added pressure as well. I mean, the environment now is just, it's terrible. My youngest recovery coaching client is 8, and that just breaks my heart.
Yeah, well, statistically, they're suggesting that 38% of the American population is obese, or 38% of the American population under the age of 8 is already obese. And so you can imagine what that's going to be like for those kids growing up, having already, sparked a lot of that genetic response internally. It makes my skin crawl. I guess, staying back with your story for now, just to get a little bit of clarity on this, because a lot of girls go through a similar kind of experience where there's a lot of pressure and a lot of competition and a lot of, obviously, hormones and so on. Now that you're on the other side of it, which we are so proud of you and you're so inspiring, now that you're on the other side of it and you can look back, yes, there's the explanations of the different triggers, but what do you think it was? What's the difference that made you choose anorexic behaviors as a way to deal with that competition and that needing to fit in and that needing to be accepted? What do you think? What do you think it was that made you choose that path? Now that you can look back on it.
To be honest, I don't know, precisely. And in all my years of therapy, we haven't got down to an exact answer of why, I chose that path. I do believe that, as I've said, with, genetically predisposed personality characteristics, I feel that was just innate in me. It was my innate sort of response to it. I also did have a destructive friendship with a girl who, and I didn't realize at the time that she was being manipulative, but she was quite manipulative in terms of the way that she would compare my body to hers, and she was a very different build to me. And so therefore I always felt that I was falling short in terms of that. And I think that made me start to feel that I was just a little bit inadequate. And because I'd started to sort of see that in this new sort of world that I was existing in, that self-worth seemed to be attached to the number on the scales or the size of your thighs, I then, I took that on board.
Yeah, I can totally understand, what that was like. I went to I had a very similar situation, and it's amazing how particularly not influential, that's the wrong word, how easily we're influenced when we're at that age and stage of our lives. There's a particular vulnerability for girls at that stage because, the basic human instinct is to be loved and accepted. And when we see that we're not being loved and accepted in the way that we think we should be, then, of course, we set about finding out ways to be loved and accepted. And obviously that was your choice there, which is, completely unconscious and completely innocent. And, at what point did your parents pick up that things weren't quite right for you? Like, at what point did you guys see that there was something going on? How far in were you?
I think it was about sort of 6 months down the track before, Mum started to realise that there was an issue here. Because I think it's also hard for parents at that stage because your bodies are constantly changing anyway. So, she thought that I maybe was just having a growth spurt and I was just kind of leaning out a little bit. And it took her a while, it took them a while to realize that there was an issue. And, eating disorders are master manipulators and lie, and cheat to get what they want. And so, it was a little while down the track before we picked it up.
And how did they pick it up? What were the signs? I mean, I'm just thinking of a whole bunch of mums now thinking of their kids that are listening. What were some of the signs that you and your mum saw that made you realise?
Or there were always excuses of I've eaten at soccer practice, or I ate at so-and-so's house, or, I want to make my own dinner, things like that. And then also hiding food. So, sitting down for dinner with everybody, but then kind of hiding it in my napkin when no one was looking, wanting to do a lot of exercise. So it really increasing, I'd always been an active person, but it's sort of like my physical activity really increased. And also just not being myself. So, Mum used to describe it as sort of like a mask would sort of come down across my face when anything to do with food was discussed. It was sort of like I went into a bit of a trance, or the sort of fight or flight response. And yeah, I think those things combined really, made her realise that there was something bigger at play.
And was there a course of action that your mum took, and did any of it help?
So as I said before, the course of action was, you go to the GP. The GP right, you stop school, you focus on refeeding Millie. So that's what she did. She stopped work and she spent every day with me, refeeding me, and then they get to what, they call an acceptable weight, and send me back to school because, it's all about the weight, and it's so not all about the weight. As I said, you've got to deal with the psychological issues that underpin the eating disorder, because if you just weight restore somebody, all of those issues are still going to be there, and the scene is absolutely set for them to relapse, which is basically what, happened slowly but surely over my high school years. And then I just started to reach new lows in terms of my weight. And then that became the new normal, and then I would drop again, into my late 20s.
Talk us through some of the internal dialogue as you rode that roller coaster. What were some of the things that you used to say to yourself?
It was all very much around the fact that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy, that no amount of playing by the eating disorders rules was ever enough. So the number on the scale was never good enough. My level of restriction was never good enough. The amount that I exercised was never good enough. So I was constantly in this state of feeling like I was failing. And that in itself was just, it was horrible, a horrible feeling, because you're going around feeling like, I often describe it like going around with a big sort of sack of bricks on your back, trudging through this black and white world where you've sort of got your blinkers on. You're very tunnel visioned, and the eating disorder just has you in its grips. And so no matter if anybody says to you, right, well, you are worthy and you are enough and you are loved, you find it very hard to believe that, because the eating disorder says to you, well, they're lying to you and you need to listen to me because I've got your best interests at heart. And, you want to be pretty and popular, and so you need to listen to me so that I can get you that. So it was constantly telling me that, if I stayed with it, then I would get what I ultimately wanted. And of course, it's all just absolutely hollow lies after hollow lies. But when you're in it, I mean, it's very, very hard to describe, and it almost sounds, and I'm saying it now and I'm thinking, yes, God, people are going to be thinking, oh, that just sounds really weird. But when you're in it, it seems like the most logical thing to do. Somebody is promising you exactly what you want and is telling you that if you play by its rules and do what it says, you will get that. It's a bit like, I guess, someone saying, right, well, if you want $1 million, here, look, I've got the formula to do that. You just need to do A, B, C, and D, and you'll get there. And, I mean, that's basically what the eating disorder was saying to me. So I thought, well, hang on, I do really want this, so I'm going to follow its rules. And even though other people were saying to me, this is dangerous, or this is unhealthy, or this is whatever, the eating disorder would then say that to me, oh, they're just jealous. They just want to have, a body like yours, or, a myriad of other things. It always had a comeback, always had a response to anything. And it's just incredibly, incredibly convincing. And, even when people would say to me, oh, you're not seeing your body correctly. Well, I mean, that's incredibly, incredibly difficult thing to get your head around. I mean, it's like someone sitting, in a room and you can see that there's a red chair in the corner and they're saying that chair's green. I'm saying, well, no, it's not, it's red. And they're saying, no, the chair's green. You're saying, no, it's red. I can see it's red. Here, I'm touching it, it's red. The paint is red. It's like, it's very hard for you to think, oh, no, that person's right and I'm wrong, because with your very own eyes, you're seeing that the chair is red. And that's an analogy I often use because people really find it hard to relate to what is going on in your head.
I think that's part of the challenge too, isn't it? I mean, it's because there are so few people who could relate. You'd be spending half your time trying to explain yourself, which kind of exacerbates the problem in the first place, doesn't it? I mean, if you're trying to explain what it's all about and what you're going through, and you're almost in a place of defending what you're going through and keeping it right from a psychological point of view, that it just re-cements that third voice.
Look, the frustration in terms of that is huge because, people have all these, misconceptions around eating disorders. And, and I even think for my mum, it was really, really hard for both my mum and dad in terms of people saying things like, oh, well, you should just do this and she just needs some tough love. And, oh, well, why can't she just eat? And, all of these people just don't get it. They don't understand. And I do think that that's got a lot to do with the fact that up until now, and I mean, we're still in the emerging stages of this, but people don't talk about it enough. I talk about eating disorders as being where depression was 10 years ago. People didn't talk about it. But then people started coming out and talking about it and writing books about it. And now it's not a taboo subject anymore. And I really feel we need to start doing that more with eating disorders because then people start to get an insight. And also people who are struggling out there, who are struggling in silence, start to feel like, oh, I have a voice and I'm not alone in my struggle. And because it's a very isolating, lonely experience. And you feel like you're out there battling alone. And I think a lot of the time I know that I felt that, I just wasn't going to get better. I was going to have to live like this for the rest of my life.
I'm curious to ask you, if you don't mind me stepping in here, you talk about this voice. And something that I've always really respected around how Carren and Cindy talk about things is, one thing Carren said is, when you hear that voice in your head, who is it? What is it? Because if you're the one listening to it, then if you're the one listening to it, who's the one speaking? And you were giving it a name, the eating disorder. Is that the same as what some people would have, Carren, around a mental illness where they hear voices in their head around other things? I really am struggling to understand how the body would naturally want to survive, and yet there's a voice in your head telling you to hurt it, yet you believe you're doing the right thing by it.
Millie, what are your thoughts on that? Because that was going to be a question of mine, given that you've kind of separated the eating disorder and you've almost personified it, that it's tells you what to do. So is that part of the healing process that you've gone through?
Very much so. So part of the healing process is, and this is definitely something that Carolyn Costin uses, these analogies, is that the whole goal of recovery is to strengthen your healthy self to a point where you can take care of that eating disorder self part of you and live in unison. Your body, mind, and spirit is reconnected and you are happy and you're living a full life. What that does is really, I guess, recognize that the eating disorder self part is, still part of you somewhere along the line. That it was still a part of me that, became obsessed about my body. And yes, it was taken to the nth degree. But it's not part of me that can suddenly be extracted and taken away forever. But my healthy self was strengthened, over my recovery period to a point where it well and truly took over my eating disorder self. And it's hard to everybody experiences it differently. And I think that's something really, really key, is that everybody's experience of an eating disorder is quite individual. Hence, the blanket approach to treatment doesn't work. But there are obviously commonalities between, people suffering with eating disorders. But people experience it, some people experience it as a voice, some people experience it sort of like a feeling or an overwhelming, sensation. For me, it was a combination. I mean, I call it a voice because that's sort of the easiest way to explain it. But when I think back to it, when I was in those moments of when it was, compelling me to do a certain behavior, there was definitely a part that was me choosing to listen to it. I could have chosen not to listen to it, but there is a part of me that was choosing to listen to it. And I find that really, really, I guess, fascinating, for want of a better word, because I do believe that, in those moments, although, yes, you're overtaken by the eating disorder, you're still not physically being forced to do the action. So whether it is to exercise or whether it is to throw away a meal, you're not actually physically being forced to do that. But in a way, it's an overwhelming compulsion to the point where you may as well be being forced to do it. And sometimes that was in the form of a voice. Sometimes it was just in the form of a feeling. But I think, when I was in the depths of my eating disorder, so say 10 years in, there was no way that I could really decipher what was my eating disorder and what was me, because, I'd lived with this beast for so long that we had almost become one and the same. And, my identity was very much wrapped up in my eating disorder.
Mm. And then who are you without that story if you are looking to heal, and who are you without that condition?
And Kim, that is one of the scariest things about recovery. And I talk to my clients about that all the time when they say, look, I want to recover, but I'm too scared. I don't know what I'm going to be without my eating disorder. And look, it is scary. It's absolutely petrifying. It's one of the, most excruciating, difficult things that I've ever done in my life. But the way I see it is you can look at it in terms of being really, really scary, and I don't know what I'm going to look like. I don't know what kind of person I'm going to be without my eating disorder. Or you can look at it as an incredible opportunity to reinvent yourself. You can become whoever you want to be. And look, that still carries with it a lot of trepidation and a lot of fear and anxiety and that whole unknown quantity. But I think when you look at it in that way, rather than just fearing it completely, and you look at it as an opportunity, I think that helps to kind of shift your perspective and help you to move forward towards recovery.
So you have gone through a lot to get yourself, obviously, to a position where you are right now. Tell us a little bit about, when you reached the point of enough is enough, I'm not doing this to myself anymore. And what was that like? And then what did you do to help yourself?
Okay, so unfortunately for me, it took me to really hit rock bottom. For me then to, I guess it wasn't even really a conscious decision, to be honest. So around that time, basically what had happened was my treatment team had basically given up on me, and the response was that I was too severe and enduring, and that basically, palliative care was really the option that should be considered. And that for me was a huge turning point, because up until that point I really had been trying. No, I hadn't been making a lot of progress, but I'd been trying. And I felt like, if the professionals are all saying that there isn't any hope, then I just sort of felt like, well, what was the point of me trying anymore? And, it was really, really hard to get up each day and try and fight this demon. And so that really set me, I was already obviously very unwell, but that really led me to that point where I was given, a week to live. And at that point, I have to be honest with you, I've never been suicidal, never really struggled with depression even. But I really felt, my doctor sort of said you have to make that decision whether you're going to live or you're going to die. And I really made that decision that I couldn't go on anymore. I couldn't face the living hell that I was having to endure every hour of every day. And that was when my dear mum decided to bring me over to the Sunshine Coast. And it was here where she found a woman who specialises in NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming, a combination of that and hypnotherapy. I had a lot of trepidation about going to see her. I really didn't feel that anyone could help me at this point. And I remember even after my first session saying to Mum that wasn't going to work, that I was too sick, and, that was a waste of her money. And she asked me why, and I said, well, Mum, I just sat there the whole time. I don't remember what the woman said, but all I remember thinking was about the size of my thighs and the fact that I should be out for a run. And Mum said, look, can you give it one more try? Just give her another go. And so I went back the next session and I said to this woman, look, it's not you, it's me. I'm too unwell. And she said, why do you think that? And I explained to her, and she said, yes, I know thinking those things. And you were also thinking, and she reeled off all of these sort of, eating disorder thoughts that I've never really told anyone that ran through my head on a daily basis. And she explained to me that, those were all, that was my conscious mind, and it was my eating disorder, and that if she had tried to interrupt that, there was no way that she could work on my subconscious. And so she started to delve into my subconscious and help me to unearth some of the major key beliefs and values that were keeping my eating disorder thriving. And that was an incredibly, incredibly confronting process. And there were many, many sessions which I stormed out of, screaming at her, saying that there was, no way that I was ever going to give up these certain beliefs. But slowly and surely, I began to realize that these were the things that were keeping me ill. And these were the things that I'd never addressed. And that if I didn't start addressing them, I was going to die. And that I had a choice in that moment to give this everything that I've got and really try with this NLP and hypnotherapy, or I was going to die. And I decided to give it everything that I'd got. I also made the decision that if this didn't work, that this was my final shot. I didn't feel that I had it in me to try it again, try getting well again. And very, very, I'm very grateful is not even a word, but by some grace of God, it worked. And, 6 months of very, very intense, hard slog got me out the other side of my eating disorder.
And kudos to you, Millie. I can't imagine the pain and the challenge and the enormity of overcoming something, especially to have this condition from the age of 12 to 27. And as we know, not all people come out the other side with life. Can you tell me what your mum and dad went through? Can you have any concept now of looking back in that time of what this did to your parents and the people that loved you?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I have been given an even further insight over these last 4 years working with NDED in terms of we also provide lived experience support to parents and carers. And so I help other parents and carers who still have daughters or sons or partners or wives who are struggling with eating disorders, and sitting in the support groups and giving them an insight into what's going on, in their loved one's brain, has really given me an even deeper appreciation of the heartache and pain that my parents went through. For my mum, it meant that she gave up her job to look after me, and she really poured her heart and soul into trying to get me well. And that really took a toll on her, caused her to have a nervous breakdown. And there were many, we look back on it now, and there were many, many, nights of screaming and yelling and just absolute despair that we wouldn't wish upon our worst enemy. And in terms of, the eating disorder, likes to fracture things. So it did its absolute best to drive a wedge between my mum and dad. Fortunately, the strength of their relationship stood the test of time, and they are still happily married. But there were many moments there where things were very, very much on tenterhooks because my eating disorder was hell-bent on ruining that marriage, so that therefore there was less of a less support and less strength in them as a unit fighting against the eating disorder and helping to get me well. It also had a huge effect on my brother, my dear brother Eddie. He is 4 years younger than I am, and we had a really close relationship as children. And then, when I got sick, basically, the focus, as much as mum and dad tried to share that focus, a huge, huge focus was on me and trying to get me well. And, it got to a point where there were, he felt that I wasn't trying, and he was right. I wasn't trying. And he basically disowned me, for want of a better word, because he could not deal with the fact that not only had I, basically commandeered his childhood, but I, was basically, as he said, mum and dad are on the verge of divorce. Mum's going to have a heart attack. You don't even care. And so he moved out. We were all living at home, family home, and he moved out. And, I only saw him at Christmas, and he would give me sort of a cursory hug. And I look back on that now, and I just think how horrible, for him to have to go through that. But I had no emotion to the fact that my only brother was basically saying, I don't want you in my life. All I thought in my head at that point when he told me that was, well, I don't care because I want to be skinny. And that was, that was my thought at that time. And I am incredibly, incredibly grateful. And I thank my lucky stars that he welcomed me back into my life when he could see that I was really making a concerted effort at getting well. And we now have an absolutely beautiful relationship that I will treasure forever. But it really, really does put a strain on the entire family unit. And when you're in your eating disorder, because it does really make you very, very selfish, and that's not who I am as a person. But I look back at a lot of what happened, and it was very, very focused around me. I really didn't care about anybody else. It was about doing what I needed to do to fulfill what the eating disorder wanted.
When you think back on your time now, and now you're watching and helping other young people, because it's men as well, and eating disorders can also mean binge eating and bulimia and all sorts of other obesity and all these things, what do you think is the main problem in this day and age?
Look, it's hard, Kim, to pinpoint, the main problem. I think there are a lot of things that really combine to make this, issue such an incredibly, it's exponentially, like there was a study came out a couple of weeks ago that showed that eating disorder rates have doubled over the last 10 years, which is just incredibly scary. I think it's a combination of the fact that we don't have a lot of early intervention stuff happening. There's not nearly enough education around, things like in schools and, signs to look out for. I think there also needs to be a lot more done around dispelling the myths and stigma that's around eating disorders in terms of, I think the media does have a lot to answer for in terms of their portrayal of, what an eating disorder looks like. And one thing I always say to people is eating disorders do not have a look. But yet when you see something on the news about eating disorders, or you see something in the newspaper about eating disorders, generally there will be an image attached of a very underweight white female. Now, that does not help to dispel the myths around, eating disorders being, something that's reserved for superficial individuals, generally female, who are obsessed with losing weight. Because, as you've said before, there are many, many other eating disorders, and they come, in all different forms. And, my caseload of recovery coaching clients at the moment, I would say about 70% of them, you wouldn't know to look at them in the street that they had an eating disorder, but yet they do. They have raging eating disorders. So I think, the media combined with, social media, the focus that we have on our outward appearance, and then these apps that can tune it's called Facetune or something, I think. Goodness knows, certainly don't have it myself, but, I see these images that are photoshopped to the hilt, and, this focus on, I think, yes, let's focus on health and wellness, because being well and healthy is an incredibly important part of being able to live a full life. But we need to take a balanced approach to this. We can't body shame people, and we can't have this culture of absolute fat phobia, because all it's doing is creating, I understand that there's an obesity crisis, but we need to be careful about the messaging that we're sending out to society. It's not just young people, it's society in general, because that then, if someone is predisposed to an eating disorder, it's, just further confirming to them that they need to, eat cleaner, do this, do that, and that they're not good enough. Whereas I feel there needs to be a lot more education about not demonizing certain foods, and, that food does not inherently have a moral value. It's about, education, and about balance, and about knowing that, you can lead a healthy, full life and eat all foods and have a balanced relationship with exercise and not be overly focused on your body. And I really would like to see there being a shift towards self-worth not being related to appearance, because I think at the essence of it, that's what it comes down to. This incredibly sort of honed focus on the way we look, and that then equaling our self-worth. Whereas, I talk to my coaching clients a lot about the fact that, what do we value in our friends? And I say to them, okay, in your best friend, what do you value? Now, not one of the things that they value in their friends has got anything to do with the size of their arms, or the shape of their thighs, or, the size of their nose, or whatever it is. It's to do with, I love how they make me laugh, or they make me feel really supported, or we have fun when we go on holiday. And I think that we need to start thinking about ourselves in terms of that, and the fact that there are all these incredible things inherent within us that are of value that have got nothing to do with the way we look.
I think there's going to be so many people listening to today's show that are going to be getting so much out of this. And, I like to think, whether I'm right or I'm wrong, I still will never know. But, I like to think that things happen for a reason, and that, things that occur in our lives are purposeful. And when I look at your life and what you're doing now, do you look back and think, well, maybe this is why I'm here. Maybe this is my purpose in this life, is to be able to have gone through what I've been through, come out the other side, and then make a difference in the lives of others by doing the work that you're doing now?
Oh, look, I absolutely do. That's exactly how I feel. And as I said before, I do not regret what I went through for a second. I do believe that it's made me the person that I am today, and I do believe that there is a reason that not only did I struggle, but I struggled so hard and so long, and my hope was taken away by professionals, because that informs how I work now in terms of ensuring that everybody understands that there is hope no matter how long or how hard they've struggled for, that they can achieve full recovery and that they can live a life of freedom. And not only that, but that they deserve that. And I feel like, I've been able to funnel all that pain that I experienced into creating this life of passion and purpose. And I really, really do feel that I feel really, really grateful that I am able to use my lived experience as a recovery coach to literally help people get well and to walk alongside them on their journeys and hold that hope for them when they don't feel that there's any hope. And help them and their families to see that there is a way forward and that they can recover. And in terms of that, I also feel incredibly grateful that, my paths crossed with Mark and Gay in terms of being able to join with them in NDED and create these big dreams come true in terms of building a residential facility. And to be able to leave a legacy of, having created, real systemic change. And, like last year I went down to Parliament and spoke about myths and stigma surrounding eating disorders. And, that is something I stood there and pinched myself and was like, wow, I've come a long way. And there are some, real change makers listening to what I'm saying and also watching with interest what we're doing as NDED in terms of really turning that medical model on its head and coming from a place of compassion and community and connection. And I feel incredibly, incredibly lucky to be in the position that I am, to be able to not only share my story, but also to be able to help, I keep saying it, but dispelling those myths, because those myths and that stigma are what is causing, eating disorders to still be swept under the carpet and causing people to sort of shrink back into the shadows and suffer in silence because they don't feel that they're sick enough or they don't feel, heard by medical practitioners. And so, yes, although it was a very, very long, arduous journey that I never, ever wish to repeat, I know firmly that I will be doing this for the rest of my life. And there is a great peace in that, knowing that I am, just where I need to be, doing just what I need to be doing.
And you're doing a great job of it too. And I just want to ask you, you touched on something there around professionals, and my experience of the few people that sadly I have been in contact with, either through mother-daughter retreats or through my daughter's dance world, and even a friend whose son in his mid-20s was incredibly anorexic. It seems, and I'm just making a generalized statement here, it seems that the medical profession, which you've alluded to, are focused on getting the calories in to bring their body weight up, let's say if we're talking about anorexia. Now, the thing in my mind is that if the person is given any calories at any cost, and one boy was told to eat deep-fried Mars bars, no joke, by a medical practitioner, to get so many calories into him, yet his experience of the whole thing was that even looking at butter or even touching a smidgen of butter was going to have detrimental effects on him. How on earth do we connect the professional world with that mental, I guess, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it is like a mental illness around this. How on earth does a practitioner make sense to a person who's really struggling?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, you're very right. We do call it a biological mental illness. I think it really does come down to medical professionals having they really need to come from a place of wanting to understand. That's my experience, because it is complicated. And they can have clients on their books for many, many, many years not making any progress. It's not easy to deal with people who have eating disorders, just as it's not easy to have one. But that doesn't mean that people with eating disorders shouldn't have the specialised support that they need. And what I've found over the last 4 years in terms of, just working on the Sunshine Coast here with clients and things is that, certain GPs say, well, I'm not taking any more eating disorders. They take up too much of my time. And responses like that just go to show that there is a real lack of compassion and understanding around eating disorders. I think, it's all very well to say we need more education, but I remember there was a seminar run for GPs about a year or so ago now, and, it was sent out to hundreds and only a handful turned up. So I think, we do have to be mindful that as a general practitioner, they aren't specialised in eating disorders and they have a lot on their plate. But I think that, with the sort of groundswelling of lived experience that's starting to emerge from both a parents and carers and a sufferer's perspective, I really, really hope that will start to change. And I think what I've found in working with my clients is that the best results that we get are with getting a client engaged with a multidisciplinary team. So you've got a GP, you've got a psychologist, you've got a psychiatrist if need be, and you've got a dietitian and a recovery coach. And everybody works together with open communication between the entire team, because what eating disorders like to do is splinter. The team, so they'll tell one thing to the psychologist, one thing to the recovery coach, and one thing to the dietitian, so that you never really get anywhere. But with that consistent, coordinated approach, preferably with lived experience in there somewhere, from clinicians, that is where I see us getting the best results. And I feel that comes from not only that, really open communication, but also that commitment to really wanting to see that person get well. They're not just a number and they're not just a box to be ticked. They're a human being who's going through really, really intense suffering. And I would like to see more medical professionals really start to understand that and not see it as something that's just, often I get people, still in that medical profession saying that it's a choice. They're making the choice not to eat and they just need to stop being stupid and start to make the choice to eat again. And it's not nearly as simple as that.
So, Millie, coming to the end of our time here on the show, what do you think is the first step? If anybody's listening to this, any mums or parents listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, okay, it's time to take some action. What do you suggest the first step that they take is? Who should they call? What should they be doing if they're just at the beginning of the journey? Do they reach out to NDED? Do they reach out to you? Where do they go?
Absolutely. Look, absolutely happy for anybody to reach out to me or to NDED. I'm sure we will put the details somewhere, won't we, ladies?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All the details will be on the show notes.
Okay.
So for everybody who's running, they can log on and find all the details.
Fantastic. So that would be ideal. We can then assess what your situation is, where you're located. We have, lists of recommended practitioners that we've had good reports from or we've had personal experience with. And we can sort of help find a pathway through for you and try and wrap a team around you. And, if recovery coaching is appropriate, we can team you with a recovery coach as well. And obviously, if you're Sunshine Coast based, we also have some incredible support group options. But in terms of that first step in approaching their loved one, I always say that it's really, really important that it doesn't come from, a confrontational place. It's just more about maybe saying, hey, look, I've really recognised that lately you're struggling a bit. Would you like to talk about what's going on for you with me? Not, directly saying something like, oh, well, you're getting too thin, or you're eating too much, or you're, because that's just going to literally, make the eating disorder arc up and their loved one go into absolute, fight or flight shutdown mode. You're not going to get anything out of them. I'd really encourage parents and carers to be just really open, honest, and express their concern, and also make it very, very clear to the individual that they are there for them no matter what, and they are not going to judge them, but that they just want to help them to get the help that they need, and that they deserve.
Awesome.
Yeah, and also I just want to acknowledge your beautiful parents, Millie, what they must have gone through, and your brother as a family, to come out the other side, all of you, and then the pride and the sheer delight they must have in seeing you now helping others, which has given you more perception and understanding around what they went through. I just want to commend you all as a family and congratulate you, my love, on the work you're doing with End ED. And I'm really looking forward to, can you just explain to us a little bit, just quickly to finish up, the live-in opportunity, because something that Cindy always talks about, whenever there's an issue going on, be it a mental, emotional issue, then one of the best things you can do is to actually extract yourself from the norm and go into nature, or get into a farm, or get out with animals, or get into a space, particularly from her perspective, onto a farm where you're cooking your own meals and you're in a community type situation. Is that what you're trying to create at that beautiful home that you guys are building here on the coast?
Absolutely. Look, it's incredibly, incredibly exciting. And every time I drive down the driveway of that property, I have a big smile across my face. And when you enter it, you literally do get this sense of calm and hope and healing. It's a beautiful 25-acre property in Mooloolah Valley, where we are about to start construction on Australia's first residential eating disorders facility. So we've partnered with the Butterfly Foundation, and it will be the first of its kind in Australia. It is aligned with the 8 Keys to Recovery model from Carolyn Costin, and we will very much be taking a holistic approach to treatment there. So trying to move away from the medical model, and also from that blanket treatment approach, and really individualizing the treatment so that the clients get exactly what they need, because as I said before, eating disorders really do tailor themselves to the individual. And what we're seeing out at the property already, as we run support groups, or I take clients out there and we have sessions in the beautiful grounds, and with the beautiful animals, we've got new little miniature therapy horses out there, Charm and Ivy, and we've got little miniature pigs and lots of chickens and sheep and some new calves out there.
Kimmery, we have to go.
I was just thinking, oh my gosh, we're sold.
Look, it is, you will have to come out and see it. It is absolutely, it's beautiful. And just being around those animals and being outside, just with the big trees, with the kookaburras, the cockatoos, it is just beautiful. And there's something about being out in nature that really lends itself to people being more vulnerable and opening up, and possibly saying things that they wouldn't have said in a more clinical setting, whether that's in an office or in a hospital. And I really do find some of the best sessions that I have with my clients are sitting out there in nature and really just connecting. And it's also, look, we have people arrive for support group and they might be incredibly anxious. These are people that, they really, really struggle to walk out of their homes because they're so anxious, and they're able to get out there and have some quiet time with the animals and really come out of their shell. And it's really, really beautiful. And we are incredibly excited to be really changing that treatment model, and hopefully showing the rest of Australia that it can be done differently, and that recovery doesn't need to happen in that, cold clinical hospital environment.
So, Millie, do you have a website that our guests can have a look at?
Absolutely. So if they visit www.ended.org.au, our contact details are up there, and they can find out more about what's happening. We also run the Instagram at ENDED Australia. And I update that daily with recovery inspiration. So if people can't get to our support groups, or they don't have the capacity to do individual recovery coaching, they can check in on that daily, and there will always be some form of recovery inspiration. And then we have on Facebook, Ending Eating Disorders.
Awesome. Well, my love, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. It's been amazing to share this last hour and also with you. Thank you for your insight, your incredible wisdom, and your incredible experience on behalf of mankind. You have done an incredible job.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Wonderful. So for all of our listeners, please go to the website, check out Millie, check out her story, and also check out NDED. And if you are feeling like you need some help, feel free to reach out. We'll make sure that all the details are there on our show notes. So make sure that you tune in next week, where we become part of the ripple effect that is changing the world. We're going to see you on the ride, everybody. Bye for now.
The 2019 Wellness Summit is almost here.
I love being at these events. They're always such a great, positive environment.
It's been really great to listen to like-minded people and to meet a few people, actually.
I've been to every summit and I've been to every one, and I'll always keep coming. It's always inspiring.
It's been a real eye-opener. We're actually signed up to go to the Breakthrough now.
It's very motivating. I think it's great to listen to people who are inspired.
And there's always something to learn and something to take away.
I think for myself, and giving myself that opportunity to learn.
There's so much going on in life and everything that you can get distracted and forget the things that you should be doing, and this always reminds you to get back on track and to focus on the things that are important in holistic health.
Just do it, suck it up and do it. It could be life-changing,
I would say it's awesome, and it's the start of changing your life. Come along, see what it's about, and enjoy it.
It's an amazing event with like-minded, positive people, and you can't help but walk away feeling great.
Positive Mentor presents the 2019 Wellness Summit, August 17 and 18 in Melbourne. Can you afford to miss out? Tickets at thewellnesssummit.com.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.